Sean, just in case some folks at home have not been tuned in and paying attention to the story, I want to go over an abridged version, a very shortened version of Eddie's career here. 19 years in the military, 8 combat tours, 2 Bronze Stars with Valors. He was nominated for a Silver Star and promotion after the 2017 Iraqi deployment. Now, with Eddie's outstanding military background and track record, how is it possible that allegations from just one SEAL or a couple of SEALs can lead to these charges, upending his life and potentially upending his whole entire career?
Listen, a great abridged version, and anybody's hearing that, everything that you just reported is factually accurate. And so your question about how can one accusation with no evidence to back it up derail and railroad a decorated, and when they say decorated, just like you described, they mean it. How can a unsubstantiated claim take down a decorated Navy SEAL, lock him behind bars for 5 months, strip him of his rights of due process, deny him his right to see his family and his friends and his community, deny him access to his lawyers? How can this possibly happen in this country? Well, those are the questions that we have been asking repeatedly of the Navy, of our elected leaders, and anybody who will listen for the past 6 months. And so, yeah, that's the situation, sadly and tragically, that we're facing, but it isn't going to stop us from speaking out. And so that's what I'm doing here today, and what we and the family have been doing for months now, is trying to inform viewers of, regardless of whether you think about the accusations, and I can destroy those on their face, but just the treatment, the absolute abysmal and horrific treatment of a decorated war hero in this country, it cuts to the core of who we are as a people.
That is really so hard for many people to understand, Eddie. I'm sorry, Sean, when you talk about this in Eddie's case, you know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of due process here. I understand that the judge, taking a look at this, recently dropped a couple of the charges against Eddie, but we're also hearing that the primary accuser here has now been granted immunity, didn't even witness the actual death of the ISIS bomb maker in question. So what do you think is motivating this junior SEAL to really pursue these charges and push these charges against your brother?
The motivation, sadly, is it grows out of a disgruntled couple of subordinates of my brother. You know, my brother's been on 7 deployments prior to this one. This was his 8th, and he pushes his men hard. He was the leader in this platoon. And so there are a couple instances when they're deployed where men in combat have stressful situations. My brother reprimands a couple of them, and I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds like allegations of war crimes couldn't possibly emanate and stem from something so simple as a bad relationship, or one guy feels as if that he has been wrongly reprimanded by his superior. But that's where this grew from, and it germinated out of this kind of simplistic and silly type of feud between two platoon mates, 2 SEALs, that then grew and festered. And the reason that it did is that it was listened to and heard by a very eager prosecution. So what folks don't really realize is that in the Navy, there are Navy lawyers, many of whom have never seen combat and don't know the likes of just the hellacious battles and deployments that a lot of our operators, our warfighters, face. They hear rumors, and what they do then is that's their job, is to go and say, okay, well, I heard this one, I'm going to follow it. And instead of following evidence, they followed a bias and they swallowed whole kind of like a story in a timeline of someone who has clear motive to fabricate. So in this case, I mean, it can simply be boiled down to, my brother was going to, and was actually nominated to be, a guy who was going to be in charge of these SEALs that he reprimanded in the future. He was going to be in charge of a training detachment, meaning that anybody who wanted to go to combat in the future, which is what you do as a SEAL, had to go under my brother's leadership. And because they knew that that was coming, because they knew that a boss that they didn't like was going to be ahead in charge of them again, they made up stories to cast aspersions. And these stories, as ridiculous as they were on their face, were swallowed whole by a prosecutor who had no idea what he was doing. And so at every step of the way, they've kind of stripped Eddie of his due process, and we're at this mess of a situation that we are in right now that would never should have began in the first place.
You know, speaking of the whole aspect of due process, I want to play a clip of Andrea Gallagher, Eddie's wife. She was recently interviewed, and it was posted on YouTube. The interview was done by the parents of Aaron Vaughn, a former Navy SEAL who died in combat. Here is Andrea Gallagher talking about the actual arrest that took place of Eddie over the summer. Take a listen.
These people had come into my neighborhood, had barricaded the streets, had 20+ NCIS agents in SWAT gear. For whatever reason, I don't know, because my husband had been locked up by NCIS that morning. He had told them I wasn't home. He had told them he had 2 children at home, and they still laid siege to our home.
Now, we talked a little bit about the lack of due process, Sean, but you say ever since then, ever since he's been locked up, there's been other issues that really aren't fair. Talk to us a little bit about how your brother's been treated unfairly while he's been locked up.
I want every American to hear and listen to this and see if you think that this is just and see if you think that this is right. Eddie, who hasn't been convicted of anything, just accused, was thrown in jail on 9/11. He was arrested from a medical appointment. So he was seeking treatment. He was in the middle of that treatment. He's arrested and detained. He's held in solitary confinement for 3 days while his feet and hands are shackled. Then there's a sham hearing where they decide whether or not he's going to be put in jail pending trial, meaning, again, hasn't been convicted of anything, nothing has been found guilty. He's just thrown in jail awaiting the chance of his day in court. That's where he's been for 5 months. The cellmates that he has, the prison that he's been put into, is of convicted sex offenders. So the brig, the military jail that he's in right now, is full of people who are pedophiles or rapists or have been accused of sexual assault. Those are the people that my brother now has to be with for 5 months pending trial, a decorated warrior who has served this country selflessly for 20 years. And at every step of the way, they have denied him meetings with his lawyers. They've denied him medical appointments on repeated occasions. You know, my brother served 8 combat tours, so his body is pretty beat up, and he needs medical appointments. It's something that you would expect of anybody who served that kind of combat, who served that kind of time in the service, just to at least see a doctor so that he can get his knees and his back treated, and they've denied him that. Again, they've denied him repeatedly access to his teammates, guys that he has served with, so that he can talk to them about, hey, look, you know that these things are false, and I want you to testify on my behalf, all of that stuff. They've denied him that repeatedly, so they stacked the deck against him before he even has the opportunity to defend himself, before he can even go before a judge and say, look, I have all of this evidence that exonerates me. They have made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do that properly. And so when I talk about fair treatment, when I talk about fair trial, the least that we can afford someone who has served his country for 20 years is the ability to properly defend himself and to face his accusers and to look them in the eye. And they've stripped him of that, which is abysmal. It's something that I think that every American needs to know. And you can bet your butt that when this is done, when Eddie gets cleared, that our family is going to be on the warpath to fix a broken system that is so systemically corrupt that it needs top-down overhaul. And so that's where we are at this moment in time.
Yeah, this case has really opened my eyes and a lot of people's eyes to some of the problems inherent with the military's criminal justice system. Sean, I know you and the rest of Eddie's family are working very hard, and a lot of the SEALs out there are working hard to make sure that he and his family have the support they need throughout this entire process. I want to go ahead and put up on the screen right now justiceforeddie.com. Folks can go there. They can find out all the details about his story. What is the best way that folks can help right now if they want to get involved?
So there's a few ways. If you go to justiceforeddie.com, we have a donation site that helps with the family, and we also have a donation site there that helps with his legal counsel. Those two things, sadly, are very much needed at this moment in time. Funds are in short supply, and so anything that people can donate out of the goodness of their heart is very much appreciated by us and our family. The other thing that they can do is write to the President of the United States and also write to their elected leaders. We've had a group of congressmen led by Congressman Duncan Hunter out of San Diego that have been brave enough to look at the treatment of Eddie and realize that this is not what our country's about. And so they've written to the president, and they've tried to hold Navy lawyers accountable for the miscarriage of justice that's going on and to put pressure on them to keep them from treating an American warrior like Eddie like crap. And so if you can contact your local officials, tell them to join the letter by Congressman Duncan Hunter, write to the President of the United States and your elected leaders, inform them about this injustice, and then visit our website at justiceforeddie.com. We'll have news clips like this and other articles that people can follow along on.
Sean Gallagher, brother of Eddie Gallagher, thank you so much for your time. You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.